A job is not just a paycheck. It is a reason to stay. It is a mortgage you do not lie awake calculating. It is the thing that keeps a neighborhood from becoming a place people drive through on the way somewhere else. When a city loses its jobs, it does not go quietly. It loses them the way you lose a language. Slowly at first, then all at once. And then you realize the people who knew how to speak it have already left. We are counting down 10 American cities where the jobs did not just decline. They disappeared. And the cities they left behind are still trying to figure out what the people who stayed are supposed to do now. Every number on this list comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. Census Bureau, and verified local data. Nothing here is editorial opinion. Everything here is a documented outcome. Subscribe now because number 1 on this list lost more jobs as a percentage of its manufacturing peak than almost any other city in American history. It has been called a comeback story for 40 years. The manufacturing employment data has not agreed. Let's count it down. Number 10, Dayton, Ohio. John Henry Patterson founded National Cash Register in Dayton in 1884. That company produced more American corporate executives than any institution outside a university. IBM's Thomas Watson started there. At its height, Dayton held more patents per capita than almost any other city in the country. Then the companies Dayton built left. NCR moved its headquarters. General Motors ran 5 regional plants employing more than 20,000 people in the 1990s. Fewer than half those jobs survived the following decade. Delphi closed. Mead Paper moved to Virginia. Dayton has lost nearly half its population since its peak of 260,000 in 1960. The poverty rate is nearly 27% to the median household. Old income is $45,200, roughly 40% below the national median. Dayton has made genuine efforts. The Wright Brothers National Museum draws visitors. The healthcare and defense sectors have brought some stability, and the poverty rate is still nearly 27%, and the city is still nearly half empty compared to what it was. Progress and scale are not the same conversation. Living in Dayton is like being the founder's grandchild. You have the paperwork proving what this place was worth, and none of it is currently exchangeable for anything. Number 9. Gary, Indiana. U.S. Steel did not find Gary. It built Gary. In 1906, the company founded the city, named it after its chairman, and filled it with workers who would feed the largest steel mill complex in North America. At its peak in 1960, Gary had 178,000 residents. Today, approximately 67,000 remain, a decline of 62%, not a dip. A city more than half gone. The poverty rate is 33%. The median household income is $38,731. The child poverty rate is 49.5%. Nearly half of Gary's children are growing up below the federal poverty line. Gary elected the first black mayor of any American city in 1968. It hosted the first national black political convention in 1972. New investment has come along the Lake Michigan shoreline. The Indiana Dunes National Park draws visitors, and the child poverty rate is still 49.5%. The children born into what remained did not choose the arrangement. Living in Gary is like being the caretaker of a building someone else designed, financed, named, and walked away from when the margins changed. The caretakers are still there. The economics have not returned. Number 8. Flint, Michigan. In 1970, General Motors employed 80,000 people in Flint, in a city of approximately 200,000. That is not an employer. That is a circulatory system. By the early 2000s, that number had fallen below 10,000. Today, it is closer to 5,000, not eliminated, relocated, automated, restructured into a number that does not resemble what it replaced. Flint's population has fallen more than 50% since its peak. The median household income is $33,141, among the lowest of any American city. The poverty rate is above 35%. Then, in 2014, the water crisis. A city already stripped of its economic foundation was handed an infrastructure failure that contaminated the water supply with lead and added the cost of distrust to the already considerable cost of poverty. The water has been certified safe. New investment has arrived. It is also a city where a child growing up today was born into a place that employed 80,000 people in their grandparents' generation and employs 5,000 in the industry that defined it. Progress and scale are not the same conversation. Living in Flint is like inheriting a job description that no longer matches any open position. Number 7. Youngstown, Ohio. There is a date in Youngstown that functions the way some dates function in wars. September 19, 1977. The day Youngstown Sheet and Tube announced it was shutting down the Campbell Works. 5,000 workers lost their jobs on that day. Not that year, that day. Within 5 years, 50,000 jobs had disappeared from the Mahoning Valley. In a city of fewer than 150,000 people, the unemployment rate peaked at nearly 25%. Youngstown's population has fallen from 166,000 at its peak to under 60,000 today. The poverty rate is 34.8%. The median household income is $34,295. The city has genuinely tried. It was among the first in America to formally adopt a shrinking city framework, acknowledging its smaller size and planning around what remains rather than chasing what left. Urban planners study it as a model, and the poverty rate is 34.8%. And 47 years after Black Monday, the Mahoning Valley is still measuring the distance between where it was and where it is. Living in Youngstown is like being told the company you built your life around closed this morning, not after a transition period, this morning. And no one in Washington is in a hurry to figure out what comes next. Subscribe now. We are halfway through a list that ends in a city that lost 78% of its manufacturing jobs since their peak and is still being described in certain press releases as a comeback story. Every city on this list has a version of Black Monday. Some just spread it over 20 years, so nobody had to report it as news. Subscribe and keep watching. Number 6. Rochester, New York. In 1980, those three companies together employed 74,000 people in the Rochester area. 17% of total regional employment. 3 companies. 17% of a city's entire workforce. That is not a diversified economy. That is a dependency waiting to be named correctly. Kodak alone peaked at 60,400 employees in 1982. Today, Kodak employs approximately 1,300 people in Rochester. The company that invented the roll of film and the consumer camera filed for bankruptcy in 2012. It did not survive the digital revolution it was technically positioned to lead. Since 1990, Rochester has lost more than 50,000 manufacturing jobs. The poverty rate stands at approximately 28%. The median household income is $47,213. Rochester has rebuilt, partially. The University of Rochester is now the region's largest employer. Downtown has seen genuine investment, and the city is still losing population, down to approximately 205,000 from a peak of 332,000 in 1950. And the neighborhoods inside Kodak's former economic radius are still waiting for a recovery that has not reached them. Living in Rochester is like working in a darkroom where you have all the chemicals it took to develop the image, and the industry that needed those chemicals no longer exists. Number 5. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore has not lost its geography. It still sits where it has always sat, on the Chesapeake Bay at a deep water harbor that made it one of the most strategically positioned industrial cities in the country. What it has lost is the economic relationship between that geography and the wages it used to generate. Bethlehem Steel's Sparrows Point Plan. T was, at its peak, the largest steel mill in the world. It employed tens of thousands of workers for decades. It closed permanently in 2012. After a long decline through ownership changes, production cuts, and workforce reductions that stripped it down before the gates finally shut. The poverty rate in Baltimore stands at 20.3%. The city has lost more than a third of its population since its peak of 950,000 in 1950. Today, the population is approximately 565,000. Baltimore has hospitals, universities, and a biotech sector that did not exist when Sparrows Point was running. It does not have a replacement for the specific job that let a worker without a college degree own a home, raise a family, and retire in the city where they started. That job is gone. Not retrained for. Gone. Living in Baltimore is like living in a harbor that still has the water but has been drained of the ships. Number 4. Stockton, California. Stockton declared municipal bankruptcy in 2012. At the time, the largest city ever to do so in the United States. Detroit took that distinction a year later. The jobs story in Stockton begins in agriculture and ends in a financial collapse. The Central Valley is agricultural by nature. Agricultural work is seasonal, low-wage, and structurally unable to support the cost of living that Stockton's housing boom in the 2000s required. When the bubble burst, the city was holding infrastructure commitments made during the good years on the assumption that the good years would continue. They did not. The unemployment rate exceeded 20% during the crisis. The poverty rate stands at approximately 21%. Stockton has made genuine progress since bankruptcy. It implemented one of the country's first guaranteed income pilot programs. Studied nationally, the city is growing again. It is also a city where the jobs that made the good times look like good times were seasonal, underpaid, and never sufficient to justify what was built on top of them. The bankruptcy was not a surprise. It was a bill that had been accumulating for years. Living in Stockton is like financing a house on the assumption that the river that feeds the fields will always run at the same level. Number 3. Galesburg, Illinois. In 2004, Maytag closed its refrigerator plant in Galesburg, Illinois, and moved production to Reynosa, Mexico. 2,100 jobs gone, not eliminated, relocated, to a facility where the same work cost $1 an hour instead of $15. Galesburg's population was 33,000 at the time of the closure. It is now approximately 26,000. 7,000 people in 2 decades. More than 20% of the city, following a single announcement from a board that had done the math and decided the math pointed to Mexico. The poverty rate is approximately 20%. The median household income sits below the national average. Galesburg has Knox College, where Abraham Lincoln debated Stephen Douglas in 1858. It has history. It has community. It has a commercial district vacancy rate that tells you exactly what 2,000 jobs mean in a city of 33,000. Living in Galesburg is like watching a company you trusted do the math on your hometown and decide the math worked better somewhere else. The math did work better somewhere else. That is the problem. Number 2. Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown is known for the flood. The 1889 dam failure killed more than 2,000 people and erased a section of the city in 40 minutes. What Johnstown is less known for is the slower disaster that came a century later, the departure of the steel industry that had rebuilt the city, employed its residents for 100 years, and defined everything about how Johnstown understood itself. The mills left across the 1980s and 90s. The population has fallen from a peak of over 67,000 in 1920 to approximately 17,000 today. A loss of nearly 75%. The poverty rate is 35%. The median household income is approximately $33,000, less than half the national median. Johnstown does not make national headlines. It is not on many lists. It falls quietly, in a way that generates neither the attention nor the investment that visibility might eventually bring. 35% poverty, a population that is a quarter of what it was a century ago. Almost nobody outside Pennsylvania is talking about it. Living in Johnstown is like surviving a flood, rebuilding on the same ground, and then watching the industry tow. Had paid for the rebuild walk out of town without a goodbye. Number 1. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In 1980, the Pittsburgh area employed 90,000 steelworkers. By 1984, 4 years later, that number had been cut to 44,000. Half the steel workforce. Gone. In 4 years. Between 1980 and 1983, roughly 95,000 manufacturing jobs disappeared from the Pittsburgh area alone. At the manufacturing peak in the 1950s, the Pittsburgh Metro employed approximately 382,000 people in manufacturing. Today, that number is 83,000, a decline of 78%. Not a rough patch, A structural transformation that took 70 years and is still not complete. The city of Pittsburgh peaked at 677,000 residents in 1950. Today, the population is approximately 303,000, less than half. Pittsburgh has genuinely transformed. Carnegie Mellon, Pitt, and UPMC have made it a hub for technology, robotics, and healthcare. Neighborhoods have been rebuilt. The air quality has improved dramatically. Pittsburgh is called the post-industrial comeback story that every Rust Belt city should study. It is also a city whose manufacturing employment is 78% below its peak, whose Mon Valley Works, the last integrated steel operation in the region, employs 3,000 people. The comeback is real. The 78% is also real. The data shows clearly which number is larger. Living in Pittsburgh is like rebuilding a cathedral on the foundation of the factory that used to stand there. The cathedral is beautiful. The people who poured the steel are not the ones who were handed a ticket inside. These are not 10 isolated stories. They are the same story, told 10 different ways. A company decides the math works better somewhere else. A technos. Logie makes the product obsolete. A trade agreement changes the price of the same work. And the city that built its identity, its schools, and its neighborhoods around that work is left holding an economy it can no longer operate. 7 million manufacturing jobs left the United States since the late 1990s. Most of them did not leave cities that had a plan. They left cities that had been told the departure would not happen, or that the market would replace them, or that retraining programs would cover the gap. The gap was not covered. And the cities on this list are the documented evidence of what happens when the promise does not match the outcome. Every city here is still trying. Not one has given up. But trying is a different word than recovered. And recovered is a different word than whole. Subscribe and check out the rest of the series. The states, the counties, and the cities where the numbers say things the official narrative has been slow to acknowledge. Thanks for watching.